restate it again. What do I mean? Well, first, God gives the instructions. Okay? In chapter 31, the process is interrupted. Moses goes down the mountain, remember, destroys the tablets and all that kind of stuff in chapter 32. Then in chapter 35, the story sort of picks up again as Moses now starts to carry out the instructions that God gave him between chapters 25 and 31. And they're all restated again. If God said to Moses in chapter 30 or chapter 25, you will create the ark 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits. Later on, as Bezalel makes the ark, it says, and Bezalel made the ark, and he made it 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits. It shows very specifically, very detailed, that everything God told Moses to do, they did. They made it chen maaseh. Just so they made it. Okay? Just like God told them to do. So we see the entire detailed process, not just once but twice, in the construction of the tabernacle. Now, fast forward 480 years. Okay? 480 years. It's the time of the kings, and Solomon is rule over Israel. He's ruling from his father's throne in Jerusalem. His father David had wanted to build a permanent house for the Lord. You remember the story? But God told him, he didn't just tell him no. He told him no, but your son will. You can't, but your son will. That's important, because that's exactly what happens. David's son, Solomon, builds the temple. But here's an important question. Actually, two questions. It's going to be your job to figure out which one is the trick question and which one is the real question. Okay? That's just how this works here. Okay? Question number one. Did Solomon build the temple to the specifications that the Lord gave him? Think carefully. Question two. Similar, but not exact. Did Solomon follow the instructions that the Lord gave him in the building of the temple? Okay. See, similar questions, but not exactly the same. Question number one. Did Solomon follow the specifications that God gave him for the temple? How many of you think Solomon did not follow the specifications that God gave him? How many? One, kind of half. Okay? How many of you think that Solomon did, in fact, follow the specifications that God gave him for the building of the temple? A handful. Okay, 6, 7.5. All right. How many of you think that that was the trick question? Couple. Okay. All right, second question. Did Solomon follow the instructions God gave concerning the building of the temple? How many of you think Solomon followed the instructions God gave? Couple, 2, 3, 4. How many of you think that Solomon did not follow the instructions that God gave? 1.5, 2, 2.5. Do I have 3? Do I have 1? How many of you think that that was the trick question? You voted for like everything.
Can't go wrong there.
That's true. You can't go wrong. All right. You ready for the answers? All right. Your bottom line. I want you to think about this carefully. God never gave specifications for the temple. Ever. In 1 Kings chapter 5, Solomon simply states that he knows that the task is to build the temple, and that the task falls to him because of what the Lord had said to David. There is no place in the scriptures anywhere where God tells him how to build it, like he did for Moses. There are no specifications for the temple apart from just the way it was built. So did Solomon follow the specifications God gave to him for the building of the temple? That's a trick question, because there were no specifications for the temple. So if you answered that question being the trick question, that was correct. Did God give instructions regarding the temple? Yes, he did. But it was very, very simple. The only instruction that he gave to build the temple was that Solomon was supposed to build it. That's it. That's it. So did Solomon follow the instructions God gave regarding the building of the temple? Absolutely. He built it. And that was all there was. In the wilderness, the children of Israel were still clearly in need of a heart change. Keep in mind, they had been in slavery 400 years. They had just come out. Okay? Remember, this is probably less than a week since leaving Egypt. Less than a week. They left Egypt, and here they are. They're still in need of a heart change. So what God does is God gives them instructions, very detailed. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. Why? Because they needed it. They needed that instruction. They needed to see God's involvement in their lives. They needed to see how much God wanted to be part of everything they were doing, because they needed that. They were given what they were given because they needed it. Now don't get too far ahead of me. You'll jump to the wrong conclusion. Okay? I know, because I've done it. Okay? You'll hear me saying something that I'm not saying. Okay? Well, I am not saying they needed it then, we don't need it now. Don't hear me say that. Okay? It's not what I'm saying. Okay? What I am saying, but the children of Israel, after 400 years of slavery, they needed that instruction. They needed that detail in a way that we don't really need today. We still need the word, but different. It's different. The detailed instructions were given because God was essentially starting with them from scratch. He had to do that. However, the detailed instructions and the oversight that he provided for Moses and his team were not given to Solomon and his team. The first question that comes up is why? Why did God not give Solomon the same instructions? Solomon went ahead and built it the way that he wanted to. We see that. He did everything just how he wanted to. Nobody said you got to build 3 stories in this thing with stairs and stuff like that. That's just how he wanted to build it, so that's how he built it. He made the specifications. As far as we know, he may have been making them up as we go along. Like, oh, hey, that looks like a good place for a staircase. I think a porch would look really nice over there. Maybe something with a grill and an awning. It's like he's made, we don't know. But he went ahead and he made it just as he wanted to. And as we had discussed earlier this week in the men's meeting, the specifications were not even in the same proportion that the tabernacle was. We might think, okay, well, you know what? He was using the model of the tabernacle and he just made it bigger. No. No, this was not in proportion. This was not even close to the tabernacle. Right? It had a courtyard. In fact, the temple had several courtyards, but that's about where the similarities stop, except for the fact that there was a Holy of Holy Places there also, just as there was in the tabernacle. But the blueprints were very, very different. Anyone with an architectural background will understand the blueprints very, very different. some similarities of structure, but it's a very, very different construction plan. Okay? The answer is found in a single word. Why did